Good afternoon, and welcome to yet another insightful and provocative Ahmed webinar. In December of 2024, as you all know, after more than a 50-year reign of the Assad family, Ahmed al-Sharaa emerged as the new president of Syria. Al-Sharaa, whose nom de guerre is Abu-Mohammad al-Julani, joined al-Qaeda in Iraq before the 2003 invasion and fought with them for 3 years. He was imprisoned by U.S. forces from 2006 through 2011. Al-Sharaa created and is considered the leader of the al-Nusra Front as a branch of al-Qaeda. This was in response to a request from the late ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. In 2016, al-Nusra was later rebranded in an attempt to distance itself from al-Qaeda as Jabhat Fatah al-Sham and then the Turkish-linked Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. On July 13th, a Bedouin group captured a Druze man stealing his car in Sweida. The situation rapidly escalated, involving retaliatory killings, kidnappings, public humiliations of men whose mustaches were shaved, and a mustache in the Druze community as a sign of respect and honor, and the forced disappearance and raping of Druze women. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least 1,120 Syrians have been murdered. More than 1,000 Israeli Druze have crossed over the border to help out their Druze brethren in Syria. This was the Druze October 7th. Before I introduce today's amazing speaker, I would like, with the permission of I-24 News, Emily Schrader, and Lorena Katab, to show this very short video. Emily?
Us now to discuss more about the situation in Syria with the Druze community is Israeli Druze journalist Lorena Khatib. Lorena, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on. Can you give us an update about what's happening on the ground in Sweida now? Have you spoken to any of the community members there about what's happening?
For sure. Emily, a brutal and horrifying massacre is unfolding as we speak now in Syria and Sweida. Innocent civilians, including women, children, and religious figures, are being murdered. There are reports of ethnic genocide, public abuse of spiritual leaders, and systematic targeting of Druze communities in Sweida, while the world, remains silent. In just a few days, the number of people killed has gone up quickly, and at the same time, al-Julani's regime, the terrorist in a suit, is sending more and more forces to the area, making the attacks even worse. And we as Israelis, we as the Druze, we ask the Israeli government to take clear and strong action without delay. As Druze and as Israelis, we cannot stay silent. We are their voices, and I'm receiving dozens of messages from Syrian citizens begging for help. The photos and the videos coming from the ground are heartbreaking. We cannot stay silent. The world must act now to stop this massacre.
Now, what is the next step? We've seen Israeli strikes. We've seen strong statements from the Israeli government. But how far will Israel go to protect the Druze community there? And do they want Israeli assistance with this?
Sure, Israel and the Air Force are attacking and, proving assistance, but it's not enough. This is a moment of a deep and painful test for the historic and moral bond between the state of Israel and between the Druze community. The Druze in Israel have stood by the Israeli country to fight and to defend the country for decades, and especially in the past 2 years, sacrificing lives and upholding shared values and protection for the homeland. Now, as our brothers and sisters are being slaughtered across the border, we call the Israeli government to act as it Druze, and we cannot remain silent. We are their voice, as I mentioned before, and just as we stand on the front lines for Israel, we expect Israel to stand up for us also.
Very good point. We have seen such incredible courage throughout, in the aftermath of October 7th from the Druze community in fighting against Hamas and all of these terrorist organizations that impact both of our peoples on the Israeli side or the Druze community in Syria as well. Thank you so much for joining us, Lorena.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we are really deeply honored to have with us today Khazam Al-Gabra to help us unpack the situation in Syria. Khazam was born in Damascus, Syria. He's the founder and president of Frontier Consultants, a Washington, D.C. based consultancy firm that provides public relations and crisis management solutions with a focus on the Middle East and the United States. Prior to starting this firm, Khazam held multiple positions with the U.S. Department of State, including senior advisory positions for public affairs in the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs. Khazam provides daily insights and analysis as a commentator on a vast array of television stations, including I-24, Kashet, Al Arabiya, Sky News, BBC, al-Sharaa, Bloomberg, and many, many others. First, Khazam, we are deeply honored to have you. As I write this, Israel is now in talks with Syria, and the situations between the Druze and the Bedouins and the Syrian government seems to have quelled down a bit. What do you expect these talks to achieve?
Hey, Sarah, thank you for having me, and thank the audience for joining today. Talks are interesting. Obviously, these talks preceded what happened in Sweida. Those existed for a month right now with American support for the most part. Obviously, the situation in Sweida kind of set everything back quite a bit. And we, during and after the situation that unfolded in Sweida a few weeks ago, we stopped hearing about a peace deal or Abraham Accords agreement. We started dealing about non-belligerency agreement or a security deal, which I have always been a proponent of. I never for a second thought that Syria is ready to join the Abraham Accords. It's just it's a different beast. When Bahrain and UAE are very stable and quite rich countries. At least the UAE is incredibly rich in that region. And they're looking for partnerships on AI, on technology, and they seem to be at that juncture in their history where they're ready to expand. Syria is not there, nowhere near there. And my concern was, for one, that if Syria joins, the standards will be too high for Syria, and it will be the odd one out when it comes to the Abraham Accords. And it will become like Sudan, right? Sudan is technically part of the Abraham Accords, but is it? The bigger concern was that a direct conflict between Israel and a member of the Abraham Accords will negatively affect the whole thing and potentially undo great work that has been done with UAE, Bahrain, and potentially Saudi Arabia in the future. So that was really the concern, that while the idea is noble, it just technically was not the right approach. Since January, Sarah, I was in Jerusalem. I communicated with the Syrian leadership. I'm like, listen, guys, you need a security agreement with Israel. Otherwise, things will go sideways quickly because nobody understands who you are, the new Syrian leadership, and what you want. And you've been pretty bad at communicating this. So how about like a baseline agreement that Israel will not be attacked from Syria, by Syrian government, by third parties, and Syrian territory will not be used as pathway for logistics for Hezbollah or any other party or group that is trying to commit terrorist acts against Israel. Like pretty simple stuff. And I told them, you need to establish a hotline where like somebody will pick up the line and say like, we're about to attack you. You might want to like change your behavior immediately. Again, none of that happened. The new Syrian leadership is just, they've been hard to deal with. I've spoken to members of the U.S. delegations that have been to Syria and have met with Shara and, his comrades, and they say they're bashful at times. They seem very inexperienced. And, I heard an interesting analogy or explanation saying these guys have lived the past 10, 15 years in neighborhoods where 2 streets down, the enemy lives. Literally, like, 100 feet away is where the front line is. They are very bashful when it comes to trusting the stranger, somebody else. And that somebody else is not a different country. That somebody else is somebody from a different town. So it's been an uphill battle trying to work with the new leadership. Again, add the lack of experience. We're not talking about any, military generals that have fought like, real wars, or diplomats that have been part of the community for a career. None of that is there. So again, it's, they're feeling their way, and they have been making mistakes. And I'll tell you, I can trace what happened in Sweida for the second time, by the way, and we'll get to that. This is not the first time that, there have been skirmishes and attacks on the Druze in Sweida. There was one maybe 2 or 3 months ago caused by a fake video that some Druze sheikh was, his video was dubbed with other, with a different voice, saying that he's attacking Islam. Again, not the first time. And let me get to that because that's important. But I can trace everything that's happening today to February 24th, when the Syrian government ran this very short conference called the National Dialogue Conference, and was supposed to create a space for different factions and different groups to come together and decide the future of Syria. I mean, this is how iconic the conference should have been. What we end up with is 4 hours of conversation that's supposed to undo around half a century of Assad rule, and complete collapse of social and political framework and infrastructure of the country that we've seen. Somebody thought in 4 hours, bringing like 1,500 people. I don't know how 1,500 people can have a conversation in 4 hours. The whole thing is like mind-boggling. And mind you, my mother was invited to that conference. That's my favorite part. Conference was supposed to take place on the 24th, in the evening in Damascus. My mom, who everybody knows resides in Washington, D.C., she lives a mile away from me, got the invitation around 6 hours before this conference was supposed to begin. We're joking. I'm like, well, our private jet is in the repair shop. Sorry, we can't make it. What else can I tell them? It was an invitation, and she did not uniquely receive the state invitation. Other people have received that in a way to say like, oh yeah, we've invited everybody, but please come but don't come kind of way, or please come but you can't come. So what happened? I mean, it's a funny story. It's not really funny. It's sad in its own way. But what does that mean? That means that the whole foreign policy and foreign diplomacy campaign that for the most part succeeded in Syria, led by Shara, led by Shebani, the foreign minister, and greatly facilitated by President Trump and the United States government, was all built on a weak domestic foundation. And when that domestic foundation fell apart, clearly, I mean, it did on multiple times, but what happened 2 weeks ago was a bit over the top, and Israel involvement kind of highlighted the problem a lot more to international media that didn't seem to really care that much. Then everything with a foreign diplomacy campaign that was built on that weak domestic foundation just kind of fell with it. And everybody's like being rude to the Julani, al-Sharaa, whatever you want to call him, right now. And I'm sorry, I don't know if you're talking, but I don't hear you, Sarah. I don't know if.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, now I hear you.
So,
Yeah.
okay. So I just wanted you to get it all off your chest, and a wonderful
Yeah.
analysis. But um, right now, the Druze are feeling incredibly vulnerable after this massacre. What sort of safeguards and protections from now on do you think there will be, if any, for the Druze, for the Kurds, the Christians, and for the Alawites?
Well, let me talk about the Druze a little bit specifically because I've recently been on both sides of the border, the Israeli border. And, you know, the average in Majd al-Shams, I think the average income would be like, at a minimum 7,000 shekels. I mean, the Druze in Majd al-Shams are are they're business people and they're good at it. I've noticed there's no poverty in Majd al-Shams, and the social support structures are fantastic. Now there can on the other side, on the Syrian side, the Sweida, and these are like very closely related. Like the Druze community is not a massive community. The average person makes a couple of dollars a day. They are below the poverty line, every poverty line that has been established. Fine, you know, if people can handle that economic woes being part of the country that's being rebuilt. But if I had the option, if I was Druze, and I'm seeing my kin across the border well off, and I'm kind of taking one for the Syria team and staying, poor, that's fine. But every week somebody's come and like want to kill me and like rape and pillage in my neighborhood. No, like, the option of Israel becomes a lot more interesting and a lot more relevant to me than it for a simple economic reason. And I've said this on Syrian on both of Syria's current domestic TVs, Ikhbariya TV and Syria TV, during the past couple of weeks. This is the second time this happens in Sweida. I said, I guarantee you guys, the third time you try to pull these shenanigans on Sweida, the Israeli flag will go up and it will not come back down in Sweida. There'll be like a new borderline around Dara and Sweida, and you'll have to deal with that because that's what will likely happen. That would be the demand by the Druze community over there that they will establish a new line. Is it ideal? No, but for the Druze, it's an existential thing. I have not. I've heard a lot of promises the past couple of weeks from the Syrian government, the new Syrian government. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. All of a sudden they released the report on the Western Coast massacres. I guess there's going to have to be a new report on Sweida right now. But the report, let me put it that way, it was above the domestic expectations of Syrian people, below my personal expectations. Which means they're trying, at least. And, they've named 280 people. Actually, what's interesting that report that was released on the Western Coast massacres made a lot of their own fighters uneasy because they've mentioned there have 280 names, but did not mention the names. So everybody who was involved, like, is kind of sitting tight right now, worrying that their name is on some checkpoint, waiting to be nabbed. It's an interesting environment. There's no stability over there. But when we talk about the Kurds, we're talking about the Alawites, talking about the Druze. There are a lot of common themes, but they are also differences. But I want to talk about the U.S. role here, because we're kind of starting to get blamed for this by making Shara feel like he has a green light to do whatever he wants, which was never the intention. Actually, the intention of lifting of the sanctions were to give Shara something to lose at the end of the day, and something to worry him. Back when, a couple of months ago, 3 months ago right now, when President Trump met with the Shah, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was physically in the room, while the Turkish President Erdogan was on the phone. And the whole thing was sold to the American people, and it was literally sold to me, and I bought it, that we're no longer going to play, technician when it comes to these localized conflicts. We're going to rely on our regional allies to solve these conflicts. Great. Actually, that's a wonderful idea. I supported President Trump when I was told by his team, like, this is the plan. It's like, great, I'm sure we're going to make sure that Turkey and Saudi Arabia are going to do everything they need to do to improve education, to prevent the spread of terrorism, to yell at Shara at every juncture. We're not seeing that, Sarah. We are not seeing that. What happened in Sweida a couple of weeks ago was directly, I am not going to say supported because I don't have evidence of that, but the Saudi statements say that it was encouraged by the Saudis. And that is a problem, because our partner on the ground, the technicians on the ground are exaggerating the problem right now. Do we need new technicians? Do we need to deploy the engineers from the US? It's starting to feel that way. And that is a big concern. And we need to also, talk about very quickly, you mentioned that produce merchant that was kidnapped. And, every conflict has a direct cause. That's like a small thing we can all point at, like, aha, that's a reason. But the indirect causes are what the history and kind of unfolds later and gets written. The indirect causes are, I'm not going to blame Assad for this, because it's beyond Assad. The animosities between ethnic groups in that region are almost 200 years old. From the 1850s, you have Druze, Christians. You have like all this hodgepodge of like localized conflicts in Lebanon and Syria. This is nothing new. But Shara came and said, I'm going to fix this. And I'm going to put Syria on a new track. Well, that's what we need to hold him accountable to. If he can't do it, either he needs help or he can't. It's one of the two, right? At this point. So either he accepts our help, or he kind of it doesn't have to completely step aside, but kind of allow others to come and work on the problem. So far, it's been a totalitarian rule by Shah, and sometimes his own family, sometimes it's like friends from Idlib. It's concerning.
So Israel is now in control of 9 or 10 military bases in southern Syria. Do you believe al-Sharaa will allow Israel to maintain control of these bases? And how secure do you think the border with Syria and Israel is going to be from now on?
I mean, he cannot disallow Israel at this point, at least not for the next 100 years. You know, this is part of the good aspects of the U.S. relationship. Now he has a lot to lose. So even like the idea of retaliation, I mean, Israel is not playing nice by any means. I mean, the Ministry of Defense the defense headquarters were bombed in Damascus. Another bomb hit the entrance to the presidential palace where Shah himself said, this is not, again, we kind of got used to that environment in the Middle East, but it's not a small thing. Also, they pretty much lost every piece of heavy, they don't have heavy armor anymore. Medium armor that's sent to Sweida was taken out by Israel a couple of weeks ago. So the heavy losses, and I think that overly aggressive Israeli stance is sending a clear message. Don't even come close to here. And that's not new either. That started, back in January, there was a truck that was allegedly collecting weapons and from individuals. A lot of people picked up weapons from security headquarters, security offices that belonged to the former regime when the regime fell. And there was an HTS truck that started picking up weapons with some local leaders. An Israeli drone fired a warning shot at it, then fired a direct shot at it. It's been always a clear message: don't come this way. Bad things will happen. There's only death and destruction if you come this direction. But how can this be solved? This is a thing. We always kind of repeat the problem, and we say, look, what a mess. It is a mess. But how can this be solved? Conversation is good, but I feel the U.S. role needs to be a more direct role. We need, yeah, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
So President Trump revoked the designation of Hayat al-Shams as a foreign terrorist organization on July 7th. Why do you think President Trump decided to do this, and how reliant is Ahmed al-Sharaa on Hayat al-Shams?
There was a bit of a brouhaha with that whole lifting of the designation. I encourage you to look at the dates, what President Trump had signed, and what Marco Rubio has put together and submitted to the National Archives, because something like this needs to go to the archives. And I recommend that you look at the dates and that show that this has been in progress for weeks. It's when President Trump went and spoke about it, it's already been a done deal. Nobody could fully understand or explain to me why this rush. Why the rush? It's supposedly under pressure from Saudi Arabia and Turkey, but mostly due to the fact that Turkey and Saudi Arabia said, hey, we'll take over here. We will provide support here, and they haven't. Is President Trump being slightly stubborn and doesn't want to undo something? I don't know. Tom Barak seemed to be playing a big role in this, in advising the president. He's a personal friend of the president. Tom Barak, I don't know him that well, but his mentality, his mindset comes from the region. His origin Lebanese. Tolerances are different in that region. Genocide is what we call genocide, maybe, a skirmish in that region. Or it's again, I can't pinpoint it. And I'm honestly afraid to ask. I can ask, but I'm afraid to ask because I don't think whatever I find out is going to make a difference on who is in charge of this policy. But I'll tell you this: that nobody, I'll give you something. Every time I come on your show, I wanna give you something that nobody knows. So, when President Trump left to Riyadh, the night he left to Riyadh, his meeting with Shah was not on his schedule. The conversation at the State Department was specifically a 2-year runway to remove the sanctions in 6-month check-ins. What happened in Saudi Arabia made a huge difference. And again, I know some people who were in the room, like they said it was a complete, like, we got it by Saudi Arabia, and we'll take care of this by Saudi Arabia. Just do this, and we'll control it. Again, I don't know what happened in the conversation, how the conversation unfolded, but what is happening on the Hill right now with the new proposed, 2 year, 6 months, that has been Marco Rubio's plan all along. So just take it from there. It's a plan that has been shared by the Hill. I mean, I'm not saying Marco is like, running behind the president. He is not. Like, it's that plan. The Hill was aware of it, and that was really what was being worked on by Treasury and by State Department, till a message came out of, like, from Riyadh by the president saying, like, no, we're doing it different now.
Right.
So there's still a situation where we go and say, like, listen, we're gonna go back to the original thinking, because this whole aggressive everything's gonna be okay, it's not gonna work.
So why do you think President Trump on June removed the Caesar sanctions against Syria?
Again, it's a see, the Syrians have been complaining that the sanctions is creating issues, and particularly economic issues. And these economic issues are directly affecting terrorism and the growth of terrorism. Now, we have a mutual friend who believes that, Joe Wilson. He keeps repeating that thing, and we can talk about why, but I'd rather not here. Everybody who has been to Syria and living in Syria in the past 6 months are saying the sanctions had no direct effects so far. And what's ridiculous is, I had this argument on Syrian television. It's interesting because the minister used to be the head of Syria TV, the minister of information over there. But anyways, the Syrians are complaining that sanctions are not allowing them to communicate with Facebook and other social media platforms properly, and remove content that is offensive, that is, potentially is calling for acts of violence. I've never heard such BS in my life. I'm like, that's not your sanction. That's their policy. Their policy is to do. It's like they're not allowing us to cooperate with them. I'm like, well, here's my question. Do you have a law right now that prohibits, calling for violence? Because we have that in the U.S. And it's not part of freedom to go and say, I want to kill somebody. That's not a personal freedom. Even fighting words are illegal in most states. So what are you doing about it? It's like, oh yeah, we're balancing a very delicate country. And not even in Sweida, Sarah, in front of the parliament in Damascus, in what's supposed to be the parliament building. It's supposed to be one of the most secure areas. A bunch of beautiful young activists, in their 20s, early 30s, sat down in front of the parliament, held up signs saying, we are against bloodshed. Without saying a side, without saying who, where, we're against all bloodshed. A bunch of hooligans, literally, I mean, I don't know, like ruffians. Like when they talk about ruffians, like in the Testament, like this is what they looked like. Like for the first time, I'm like, oh, that's what a ruffian looks like. Came up with sticks, started beating on the people protesting, again, not against a specific party, against bloodshed. And the men were calling women such ugly words. And there was not a single policeman inside. And that incident, it may sound normal for a region like the Middle East, not unusual, but it reminded a lot of people back to the same area at the very beginning of what's called the Syrian Revolution, where regime thugs were beating activists in the same way and calling them names. And people were like, oh, well, it became iconic in a way because like, well, the same people, the same actions, different people. And I don't know, we think, the people that were like under Assad kind of dressed it slightly better, but committing the same violence against civilians. We're waiting still for laws that ban calling for acts of terrorism. It's not hard. Sharaa is in full control. His president, prime minister, head of the parliament. He is technically the head of the judiciary as well. This guy can decide anything right now. He has a magic political wand at this point, but nothing.
So
Yeah,
if I'm
sorry.
not right,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, last March, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the Kurds, decided to align with Ahmed al-Sharaa. Do you know why they've decided to do this?
Under immense American pressure, but again, kind of the details were skipped.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the same kind of thinking is going to, or the same call to join the Syrian National Army, Syrian National Forces, like current government forces, because there's like SNA is a different thing. But anyways, um, let's say I'm the Kurds, right? I've been fighting for the most part against Sultan Shah forces that are they're Syrian forces that are Turkey backed, that have fought in 3 or technically 4 theaters so far. They fought in Karabakh and Azerbaijan, they fought in Libya, they fought 2 distinct battles or wars in Syria against the regime and against SDF. So now I'm told, yeah, I've been fighting these guys for the past 10 years, 12 years. Now I need to be in the same barracks with these guys. I mean, how can you? Like, I mean, let's think Union and Confederacy.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
the war ended on much clearer terms, by the way, and not like Union soldiers were not sharing, a barrack hall, sleeping hall with the Confederacy. It's just they'll get stabby at night. Like nobody. There's no plan. This is a problem. Like the U.S. having this like backseat role created expectations and no planning. And this is why, honestly, let me go back super quickly to that conference I mentioned back in February. The conference was under UN pressure. So because it's under UN pressure, it was done quickly without like a clear purpose and clear understanding of what's expected from that conference. The same thing with SDF. SDF is, expected to join. Like, what does that mean? And let me touch on this point as well. There's so much focus on the army in a very outdated, let's call it Soviet or Eastern, like old Eastern approach to the army, where the army does everything. Army shows up everywhere. Like it's an army, it's a national guard, it's your local police force, it's your friendly, traffic police officer. It doesn't work that way. What I've told the Syrians so many times, like you need to focus. You don't need an army because we're gonna fight. Who are you gonna go? You're gonna fight the Iraqis. The Iraqis have like F-16s. You want to fight the Lebanese? Shame on you. That's like we're not gonna go back to that. We're gonna fight Israel. Well, I mean, I do not recommend that one. It's not gonna look bad things will happen. So why do you need an army? You need police. You need an investigative civilian police force. You need a bureau of investigation. I told him, like, why don't you think of like an FBI model, right? Where you have people who are actually smart, and these will lead, like, will become your, the shining city on the hill that all the other civilian forces will look up to and say, like, oh, next we have an FBI. But no, they want to create more and more armies. I mean, like, now it's like we're talking hundreds of thousands. And I'm like, why do you need that?
Tragic.
Why do you need that? And it's such a drag on the economy. While people are still getting kidnapped and being, shops being robbed, like, you obviously need a police force. You don't need an army.
Right.
So again, naivete, because they're used to having armies. And President Trump, honestly, is not saying, like, is also from that mindset. It's like, army good. I'm like, well, not always. Not always. Yeah.
Right. So, as you know, Israel is always being accused of being an apartheid state, settler, colonialist, etc. In light of that, can you comment on Israel's efforts to maintain a new extended security buffer inside Syria and the impact that these efforts would have on the Syrian population and in the international community?
Everything is interconnected. I mean, obviously, Israel right now has grown to a point, like, grown, socially, politically, militarily, that needs a long-term plan. We don't see that. It's still very ad hoc, very reactive. And I don't think it's unhealthy for Bibi or, Dermot to come out and say, well, our plan is to occupy this zone for the foreseeable future. Not because we want to make sure, the adversary is aware, but there are allies that are unsure what's going to happen. I'll tell you, Sarah, the Druze in Majd al-Shams, the Alawites in Gajar, in Israel, they're still not 100% sure if Israel is going to go back to certain lines that will later be defined, and kind of remit that territory back to Syria. It's unclear. I mean, because all the conversations are being happening in private with the Syrians. This is a massive issue for the Druze, more than the Alawites. The Alawites can go to Haifa and, like, they'll be fine, but the Druze will not abandon their homes. It's part of it's almost religious for them.
Right.
To not, like, this is our land. I die here. I get buried here. Like, I say this, like, semi-jokingly, but when I was in Majd al-Shams, I made some great friends, and I said, and they're showing me these, like, beautiful garden apartment buildings being built, and I'm like, sell me one. I got, like, a really serious and stern look, and I was told, you pick a bed, any bed in any house here. You pick it. You'll sleep there tonight and every night if you want. But we don't sell our land. Again, all, respectful, and this is based on certain, political and social problems of the past that made the Druze decide not to do that. Also, they don't accept new Druze people. Like, you cannot become Druze. They're interesting people. They're not going to leave. They're going to be part of Syria. That's not sustainable. I mean, economically, etc. Now, what we need to talk about really is not how to draw conflict lines, is how to draw plans for peace. And this is something I've been trying to push, but every time the timing doesn't seem right. I want to see trade in the Golan. At least between Druze villages, because the Druze on the other side of the border, on the Syrian side, are not living in a vacuum. They're part of the economy. So let's start looking at trade. Let's start about moving products into Israel. By the way, really cheap, really good produce comes out of there. Israel brings some produce from as far away as Brazil and Argentina. Well, let's talk about Syria. That's my other joke, that I used a lot in Israel. It's like, well, you have a lot of like goyim on the other side with like plenty of time. Let's give them like a task, and through the optics of modern commerce,
Right.
that's my little joke. But again, it's not happening. It's not happening. Like everybody's looking at the security situation, not looking at the potential mutual benefits, and not only to economic, like short-term benefits, but
Right.
long-term impact, social impact. Because once you trade with somebody in that region, somehow you become partners. So that is really where I've always said that's where the mindset should be
Right.
in a country that needs financial support and economic support at this point.
Yeah. So we've had a lot of questions that have come
I am
in.
impressed. Yeah, I see like 10
Yes,
some
yeah,
questions. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
One is Turkey meddling in Syria doesn't seem to be at all helpful to Israel. Is anyone in a position to counter the Turkish meddling in Syria? And I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. So,
Mhm.
where is the financing coming in? Um, is and Iran involved, and how much? Um, and finally, millions have fled under Assad. Are they making their way back?
Millions of, sorry?
Syrians have fled under
Yeah. Yeah. Under okay.
the Assad
A
regime.
lot of great questions. So the Turkish influence, it's not new. I mean, and it's not as direct and simple as you may expect. Let me put it in perspective, in a military perspective. The forces that are backed by Turkey in Syria are between 60 to 80,000 fighters. HTS, if you kind of stretch it as far as you can, it's 30,000 fighters. So, the Turkish backed elements that were never actually part of HTS are the big force. They're not the small force, and they're the one that are better equipped, better financed, better trained, and potentially supported by air if needs be. Shara understands this. He also understands there's like literally a whole floor at the Four Seasons Hotel in Damascus occupied by Turkish intelligence, and they make friends quickly. There's also, and we have to understand this. It's weird. It's also like the Palestinians have the same thing. Is this whole idea that the Ottoman Empire was good, and that occupation actually, it's funny when they say like we're under Israeli occupation. It's like, what like era in your history is good? It's like, oh, well, during the Ottomans, like when you were under actual foreign occupation. Is that like so again? Oh, they're Muslims like us, so they must not be, they mean us harm. Well, let me point you to Iran real quick, and they're like very Muslim. So, but social acceptance of Turkey is a lot higher than any other foreign, um, you know, interlocutor or interferer. Uh, it's interesting when it comes to Turkey. It's not going to change, and the relationship between President Trump and Erdogan is great. And there's been push to get Turkey to do more. Now, I think the Turkish-Israeli conversation has been very productive for the most part. So, if you remember, Turkey were like they sent the real estate agents to look into military bases on the Israeli border in the southern part of the country. Remember that a few months ago? Yeah, Israel, like, well, if you're looking at that base, hold my beer for a second, and next day there was no base anymore.
Right.
So, yeah, cool. IDF, IAF, cool cats. Then they kind of pave the way to a political conversation always.
Mhm.
Uh,
Now,
the, yeah,
in,
sorry.
in terms of where is all of the financing for this coming from?
The Gulf. Who needs Iranian money when you have Gulf money?
Right.
Yeah, like you got Saudi money coming in. I don't know how much Emirati money coming in. Emiratis don't like give you bags of cash. They make like solid trades. The Emiratis are shrewd that way. So the Emiratis are being involved in the ports. They're like starting to finance ports again. There's like I hear $150 million weekly that come to the government, and Qatar mostly takes care of that. This is for like government salaries and government operational costs. Again, you know what? I don't mind. Really, I don't mind. Like let people pay on, but at the same time, I would like to see a steps toward preventing that money from supporting terrorism in the future. I want to see an education system that tells kids terrorism is bad. Don't be a terrorist. It's a bad thing. Whether theologically or from a basic non-theological human perspective. I want things to talk about peace. I mean, like there's a lot. I want laws that prohibit somebody from saying I want to kill my kin.
Right.
Like
Or
brother
kill
is
my
killing
neighbor
brother over
because he's from a
ideologies that
different ethnic group. It's crazy.
Sarah,
Yeah.
brother, forget ethnic groups within Sunnis themselves. Within
Mhm.
I'm Sunni technically, so like,
Right.
I see. There's something called they're making fun of the Sunnis who are against violence. They're saying the cute Sunnis, literally, like they write cute in Arabic letters, and it's supposed to be a slur.
Awful.
And they talk about the Umayyad Empire
Right.
without any knowledge of that means. I'll tell you, the Umayyad caliphs used to drink like fish. Like if they want an Umayyad kind of environment, they need to get wine making perfected very quickly. Again, and I remember there's a final question about the people who are coming back. They're not. They're
That's
not.
right.
They're not.
They're not coming
They're
back.
not. And a lot of people came the first few weeks. I mean, there's a level of instability when it comes to personal safety. It's not
Mhm.
huge, but it's significant enough. You got people that get kidnapped in the middle of the day for ransom still, and people with money that want to kind of come and invest. They don't want to be like kidnapped and ransomed and killed. Like, that's not cool.
No.
Um, the services are not there. If I'm coming from Washington, where I get like I have 400 amps coming to my house, and I have like 1 gigabit per second internet. I go
Mhm.
there and I turn the water on and I get nothing. I'm like, well, nah, I can't do this. I can do it for a week, 2 weeks, see my friends, see my family, my extended family, somebody, but like, I can't live without water, running water.
Right. All right. So, Kazam, I want to thank you very, very much. This has been really excellent, very informative. Before we adjourn, we have a very short video to try to respond to the one-sided um, public relations that has been in the news about the quote-unquote famine in Gaza. I just would like my wonderful assistant Lily.
Actually, Sarah, can you come back to me real quick on this because it's
Yes.
interesting. The audience need to remember. I cannot recall a conflict where one side has been solely responsible and committed to delivering aid to the adversary's population, while that population clearly still supports the adversary. It is if you're having conversation, if you're telling people, tell people like this whole thing is a first in history. This is one for the books.
Right.
And there is a setup where Hamas knows it cannot win militarily. It cannot defeat Israel. There's no way. But chipping away the public image of Israel day after day after day by making Israel, responsible for aid that is impossible to deliver. And this is, I mean, we've had this conversation. I'm going to see Johnny Moore tonight, and I'm going to tell him, like, it's what we call in the business a non-permissible environment. It's an active theater. God bless you for trying to deliver aid. You cannot succeed. It's an impossible mission. So
Yeah.
there needs to be a red line for aid. If you have an active Hamas fighters in that region, you cannot deliver aid. And there needs to be a mechanism to ensure there are no active fighters, because there are active fighters. Nobody can say, "Oh, like Hamas is defeated." It's not. They're inflicting casualties every day. So this whole thing that we got into, and this is why Wood resigned, by the way, from GHR. They said, like, this is mission impossible. We're all going to end up in courts for failing to do something we're not even supposed to do in the first place. So I digress. Sorry, I had to mention this because it's
Right.
important. Go ahead.
In the meantime, for those of you who are still on, and this is going to be replayed on YouTube, I'd like you all to see what it is that Hamas is doing with the aid. Are trucks of aid that have been commandeered by Hamas. The people are rising up and throwing stones at Hamas. Hamas is coming through with rifles, with loaded rifles, not caring where the rifles and the bullets land. There are more than one side to the story. And this does not make the New York Times or the Washington Post. So I just want to leave you with that and to let you know, first of all, how delighted we are with Hassam Al-Ghabra's wonderful analysis. He is a brilliant thinker and really knows Syria from the ground up, was raised there, understands all the ethnicities, the populations, the dynamics, and how phenomenally flawed the premises of the foundation that Ahmed al-Sharaa is working on. And, every single day we are on Capitol Hill trying to tell the truth about Israel and the Middle East. Please, if you can, support us at www.ametonline.org and tune in to all of the marvelous stations where you will see Hassam Al-Ghabra give his phenomenal analysis. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. And yeah, please support Ahmed. It's actually one of very few, less than a handful of organizations I personally support because of their great work. So please support Ahmed.
Thank you so much.
Especially if you like what I said. Thank you.
Thanks.